Right. Okay. So, hello everybody. It's Thursday night. It's 6 o'clock. Welcome to Thursday Garden Chat. It's me flying solo this week. Noel is busy. I was away last week, so we're sort of we're taking it in turns. And just a little bit to say before I introduce tonight's guest. You've probably, well, you will have all noticed we've got a fancy new website, which we're really pleased with, but we really would rely on everybody to give us comments and feedback if there's things that are not working or you're not finding things, because we're hoping it's more streamlined and it's a better fit, but we need feedback. So if like I say, do email us if there's anything that you're not sure about. We've started our winter courses. So we did a few courses. The courses slightly vary from webinars in as much as they're linked together. So we started last night with Paul Hensey, who is starting beginners SketchUp. And that's going to run for 8 weeks. And then he goes into advanced SketchUp, which will take us into the new year. And then he's going to be doing his a course on construction detailing. We've also got a course starting with Magda Pelker on digital visualization, as well as webinars dotted through. So it's quite a full calendar this year, actually. There's going to be quite a bit of Zooming during the winter months, which is good. So they're all on the website under courses, easy to find, and webinars. So if you look at what's on, everything is there, but courses are listed separately. If you're not a follower of Garden Masterclass and you want to just get a newsletter, we send out a newsletter once a month. Telling you what's happening, then just sign up, and on the newsletter we only send one out once a month just to keep you up to date. So really that's kind of all that's happening at the moment. So I'll move straight into introducing our guest this week, and it's Julie Witmer, who's in Pennsylvania, Western Pennsylvania. And I actually met Julie in person in April this year in a quite a strange, not a strange way, but it wasn't strange at all, but it was a lovely way. I arrived at the Dixter Plant Fair, opened the door, sort of put a foot out on the grass, and I heard somebody talking to Fergus saying, "Oh yeah, I'm from Pennsylvania," and my ears pricked up immediately, because if Pennsylvania, then I think, well, I must know them if they're from Pennsylvania. And I think, oh, and then kind of everybody went off into the plant fair, and then a little bit later on I had a tap on my shoulder and Julie said, "Hi, can I introduce myself?" And we stood and had a good old chat. And that's the thing about the Dixter Plant Fair. It's as much about meeting and catching up with folks as well as buying plants. And we've just had the autumn plant fair last weekend. Julie wasn't there, unfortunately. But anyway, Julie, it was lovely to actually meet you in person. And it was so nice to actually have a good old chat, and then lots of people in common. So anyway, welcome to Garden Masterclass.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Annie. Yeah, that was such a treat. I would highly recommend it. I know, because people plan trips over to plan it to go at the time of the plant fair. You can't bring anything home, of course, but it was just a delight to get to see everyone and get to see so many wonderful plants, and then to have Great Dixter as your kind of chill out moment, to take a walk away from the crowd and walk. It's just kind of the most magical weekend.
Yeah, but while you were over, you went on a sort of well, I was going to say kind of breakneck speed tour of English gardens. And when you said, because I said, "Are you going to go down to Wildside?" Yep, that's the other end of the country. You're going to go up to Beth Chatter. You visited quite a few gardens in a very few days, didn't you?
Yeah, we did. I think it was an American's trip to British Gardens, because we hit the road and we did it. Yeah, we swung up to Iford, and we actually also down then Wildside, and we got to swing all the way up to Ashwood. And
that's amazing, fantastic.
We had tea with John Massey and got to see his hepaticas, which is we had to get up there and see those.
Wow.
So being native plants to this area as well. So yeah, it was a wonderful trip. But then we got to spend, about 4 days at Dixter, right in the middle, and it's very grounding and special to be there right as the tulips were bursting open,
Yeah,
those few days. So
it's a lovely
yeah, it was
time
a
of year.
magical moment. Yeah.
Oh, so Julie, apart from us just having a little chat about what's wonderful about life, I mean, actually, before we move on, I was stood at the plant fair this last weekend, and I looked out, well, and we were chatting, a whole group of us, and we were saying, if only the world was like the Dixter Plant Fair, if the world
Yeah.
operated like the Dixter Plant Fair, full of lovely people, happy to see each other, just, lots in common, smiling
Yeah.
faces, that would be the best thing ever if the world
Yeah.
was Dixter
Yeah.
Plant Fair.
Amen. Right. So, and I think that I kind of get some looks from people when I say, tell them just my love and admiration for Dexter. But what you just said, that's exactly it. What,
It is, yeah.
the generosity and the kindness. And that is really ultimately, something that I think as even as American gardeners, that's a goal of mine to try to bring that
Yeah,
energy here and hopefully show it through my own garden. So I garden in Western Pennsylvania, which
right.
is, to give you an idea, that's 300 miles and a mountain range away from Chanticleer and Lockwood
300 miles. Yeah.
Gardens. We're
Yeah.
at the opposite corners of our long,
Yeah, because
rectangle.
Pennsylvania is kind of that shape, isn't it? Yeah, yeah,
It is
yeah.
long rectangle. And so I don't get over there very often.
Hmm, hmm.
And so I know I missed you when you were over here because
That's right.
I had another speaking engagement. But so we are, I kind of am in this special area because the Great Lakes, come down and at the lowest point of the Great Lakes, and then the side of the Appalachian Mountains make this little squeeze point, and I am right in the middle there. So in the top northwest corner of Pennsylvania.
Right,
So
right.
it's an interesting area. We get quite a lot of birds that,
Hmm.
come through this way because it's kind of a channel, um,
Oh, right,
which my husband loves because he's a birder.
right.
And so it's an interesting area. And my friend Joel, who you also met in
Yes, I did.
April,
Yeah.
he actually lives and gardens just 5 miles away. And so where I am, it's clay, but where he is, he has these vast sand
Oh.
deposits from the
Mhm.
glaciers. So from coming down, that was part of the Great Lakes.
Yeah,
So it's a really interesting area to garden. It's also difficult in a lot of
yeah,
ways
yeah.
because it is more of a continental climate. We get much colder weather than you all do, and we
Hmm.
get much hotter weather than you all.
Right. Yeah.
So we have the extremes. It gets quite cold here. And so we have that to deal with, and yet our rainfall is pretty consistent, and we have the green rolling hills of Pennsylvania. um,
Wow.
so
And what zone are you in? I mean, because obviously,
yeah,
every American wears their zone on their, it's like they know what zone they're in.
yeah, horticulturally zone 5, 6.
Right.
Technically, they
Okay.
moved us to 6, but just the problem, as I'm sure you've heard, is that they calculate those numbers with the average, and
Okay.
weather is rarely average. You
Yeah.
get extremes,
Mhm.
and so even just last winter, we definitely had solid zone 5
Right.
cold, cold weather. Which can be quite cold. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, so it's challenging to garden here, but I also, we're not near any coast. So we're we're 400 miles from New York and the High Line.
Right.
And but I'm also 450 miles from Chicago and Pete Odof's gardens and all
Yeah.
that going
Yeah.
on with Roy and all that out
Mhm.
there. So, but I'm only 60 miles from my nearest botanical garden, which is Phipps Conservatory, and
Oh, right.
which is a godsend to us in the winters of Pennsylvania when we can go inside there for the orchid and the bonsai show in January. It's almost as good as going to Florida for the weekend.
Yeah.
So So it's a difficult place to garden, but and we're also very rural here. So
Right, right. And is
with,
that where you grew up, Julie? Are you from that area originally? Yeah.
I am. I've lived my whole life in Western Pennsylvania, and actually, interestingly, after we moved to this small town, I found out that my ancestors from 200 years ago were some of the first to live there, and I had no idea.
Wow,
So,
wow.
so it's kind of surprising. I had no idea when I came back, but interesting how we gravitate to what feels familiar, I guess. So,
Yeah, yeah.
um,
So Julie, before we talk about kind of how you operate now, because that's the gist of this evening is kind of the way, what you do and how you do it. But what's your backstory then? How did you get into horticulture and design? And tell it. Well, have you always been in gardens, basically, or not?
Yeah, no, I do not have the classic childhood story of growing up in gardens. We were rarely outside, actually, and I did always love flowers. When I was little, I used to say I wanted to be a florist.
Ah,
And but we were rarely outside, and so not in gardens. We did visit Phipps
mhm.
Conservatory a few times, so there's a budding point there. But I became, I grew up, I went to college, became a teacher, and
Aha.
it was actually when I was done teaching, when I was done getting my certificate almost as soon. I was 23, and I went to work at a nursery instead of going directly to teaching, and that was what did it for me. I learned about plants. I felt hook, line, and sinker for plants, and
Mhm.
propagating plants, and being in the greenhouse on a winter's day doing rosemary cuttings and pelargoniums. And so it was just that's where it started. And then I became obsessed with reading about British gardening, in particular. And so I went to my small town. It really, I think I blame it on the small town library because, a lot of the books were older, they
Mhm.
were well read. And so they had all of Christopher Lloyd's books. They had a few Beth Chatter. They had some John Brooks and Penelope Hobhausen. That was about it. And so I just read them, and then I
Yeah.
started sending away, getting more. And so this idea of succession planting, it's just electrified me. I thought this is the way to go.
Right.
And specifically Christo's book, which I just found out like last year that Fergus had quite a lot of influence on the succession planting
Yeah.
for year-round pleasure. But that book, and just thinking about also growing in different conditions. So Beth Chatto, and the bogs and the rock gardens, and then I've become interested in just traditional gardening crafts. So topiary and the hurdles, and I even started doing my own pottery in the last few
Oh,
years.
right.
So I
Right.
love the
Yeah.
idea of making my own pots for what I want to grow. I do plant photography, and I do have some photos in the Primrose Lovers book. There's some from Chanticleer that
Yeah.
I took
Yeah.
on a glorious day, and those photos are in that book that I love. And then I write about gardens. So I write about my making this 1 acre garden.
Mhm.
It's the second garden I've made. The first one was a bit smaller, a bit of a postage stamp, and then I'm making this garden. We're right in town,
Mhm.
but it's a small rural town, and we call it Havenwood, and it's about half wooded property.
Mhm.
Um, and I think because we're inspired by that Dixter spirit of generosity,
Mhm.
and we were able to open actually. So open gardens are not really a culture here
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
the U.S., but it's kind of catching
Yeah.
over
Yeah.
on the East Coast and with the Garden Conservancy. But it's just not a thing that people do around here.
Yeah.
So I can't tell you how many times this summer we opened twice, and I had to just explain what it was.
Lovely.
It's
Yeah.
just come walk around my garden. And sometimes people, think like, are you
The
showing me
catch, yeah. What's the catch?
potatoes? Like, what are you? But yeah, but people loved it, and it
Yeah.
was, we're going to be open next year for the Garden Conservancy. So the first garden in our area, along with Joel's garden, will be open as well. And and so just wanting to create a center to share it, and hopefully in the future, doing more of, maybe having children's classes, maybe having adult
Wow.
lectures right here, just in our home. And so I think that kind of gives you an idea. I think when you live in a rural area,
Yeah.
you kind of have to be self-sufficient in what you're doing. And so
Mhm.
it's like there aren't, um, many reliable, gardening businesses you can rely on. We do have a couple wonderful nurseries, but there aren't
Yeah.
tons of nurseries,
Yeah.
and so there are, and there are almost no paid, professional gardeners.
Right.
And so as a designer, when I start to try to, um, help people through a plan, you quickly realize that this cannot be a process just of drawing it up and handing it off,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it will never happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
So being a rural, gardener means kind of, um, from the get-go weaving in this garden coaching,
Yeah.
which Noel asked me, to
Yeah.
talk about,
Yeah.
and just weaving it into the whole process. So
Yeah.
it's not really this tacked on thing at the end. It's this thing from the beginning that
Right. Right.
immediately when we start talking, we're working through, um, a lot of things to help, so
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
the whole process can be successful.
Yeah. Now you mentioned your photography, and I know you've got some rolling images. So do you want to set those rolling, and
Sure.
we can carry on chatting? Um, what I'm interested to know is, did you phase teaching out and gardening and garden design in? So did you do the two together, or did you just stop and start? How did that happen?
No, I've been doing it all together. So
Yeah.
in the sense that I actually home educated my own children. So I have
Oh, wow.
three children, almost grown. One gone, two still in, high school,
Mhm, mhm.
upper grades. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, so this is my home garden, Havenwood.
Right.
All these pictures are from,
From your
my,
garden.
my own
Lovely.
garden, Havenwood, which is in Western Pennsylvania, and we have built this over the last, 11 years,
Mhm.
while living as a family here, and, delivering truckloads of sand, and the kids having a week at the beach, and then us moving it all with wheelbarrows. And, um, so,
Lovely.
um, it's been a family project
Family
along
affair.
the way.
So what made you what was it that made you think I need to organize coaching and bring that into the design process? Where at what point did you think I can't just deliver a design and say to these people, off you go, here's your garden, call me if you need me. So how did that happen, that realization that people actually needed this other sort of a service in a way, or rather unique service?
Yeah. Um, so as I said, being in a rural area, you're kind of, made to be more self-sufficient.
Yeah.
And what I realized as a designer, and I should say, I started with people right around me, but for the last decade, I've been working with people actually coast to coast across the US.
Oh, wow.
Um, so I did a musician's garden in Nashville, and he put me in
Wow.
his book a few years ago. And then so it kind of
Yeah.
exploded. People wanted to get in on, having someone to talk to help them through their
Yeah.
issues with, their property and what they were dealing with. And I realized that, if I wanted them to be successful,
Yeah.
that I needed to slow down and
Yeah.
I needed to ask a lot more questions
Yeah.
and I needed to, walk them through so
Mm.
that they felt comfortable.
Yeah.
Because, like these things you're saying, the pond, a kitchen garden, the people look at these things and it feels overwhelming
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
them. And so, and rightly so, it takes some time and intention planning. It takes, figuring it out, to
Mm.
know how that's all going to come together. Um, but and so I realized that I needed to empower them and
Yeah.
think more about collaboration,
Hmm.
with the people I was working with my clients, to empower them so that they can know what to do, because they are the ones who are either going to do the work
Hmm.
themselves or pay for it, right?
Yeah.
So I needed to I think have a position of humility
Yeah.
towards them, and really validate and listen to their concerns, and what I'm not selling as much a product, but a state of being,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
state of being a gardener.
Yeah.
Because and for a lot of people, like I said, we're kind of very far from everything else, and so it isn't a common experience
Mm. Mm.
in the US to actually have even gone to a botanical garden or
Yeah.
to see a more intensive planting.
And how do you get that message across? Because I mean, you were saying that having an open garden was a bit sort of odd. People are thinking, oh, what does that mean? You've opened your garden. So, given that you are, you're a bit of a maverick there, and so how did you first launch into saying, well, this is how I'm going to do it? And were people receptive to that? The slightly different way of working with the designer. Were they really kind of relieved about that you were going to help them?
Yeah, I think so. I think
Yeah.
relieved is the word,
Yeah.
because people have, and this kind of gets to another thing. People kind of have a lot of baggage about
Yeah.
their gardens,
Yeah.
about especially residential gardens, which is what I like to do. I have done some commercial projects,
Hmm.
um, but I just like working in the personal residential gardens
Hmm.
for many reasons. For one thing, I do love children, and I love, as a teacher, love teaching children. And I realized that if I could, help families get over the hurdles, that those children could grow up, you know.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
my children have gotten to grow up with all of these, they know these plants, and
Yeah.
sometimes they'll say, Mom, the kids, they don't know what a plant is,
Yeah.
but I think it's by living with it every
Yeah. Yeah.
day
Yeah.
and seeing it grow and seeing it bud, and now seeing those, this pond, it's all like dead looking stalks out there and the seeds are dropping, by living with it,
Yeah.
get to know it in a totally different manner.
Yeah. And how does
And
how does your formula work? Is it different with different people? So do you, for example, say, I'm here's the design that we're going to implement it, and I'm going to come and see you once a week or once a month, or we'll have a Zoom call or whatever. So is it different with different people, or do you have a sort of set way of have you got a formula that kind of applies to everybody?
yeah, so I'd say the answer is both.
Right. Okay.
It's
Yeah.
some
Because
of
everybody's
both.
different. Yeah.
Because sure, I have standard steps that I'm, working through. Right now I have kind of three clients that are kind of all going, and they're at different places in the process. Um, and yet I think I do a lot more of putting the ball in their court
Hmm.
and asking them, what would you like next? So here are the options. We can go this way, this way, this way. Which option do you want?
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
and that comes down significantly with concept plans, concept designs. When you get to that point in the process, I really try to come up with multiple ideas that would work,
Hmm.
once I've looked at the utilities and the slope and all of the things that are sometimes difficult for homeowners to
Hmm.
remember to add all those things up, if I can come up with 3 or 4 different ways of putting together a problem, and a garden, I like doing that. I'm kind of a problem solver. I'm also kind
Mm-hmm.
of a helper. So I like helping people solve their problems, and I like being creative and thinking of different ways to do it and then letting them choose. So
Right.
that's because, again, they're the ones who will be living there. They will be working, building this from scratch in
Yeah.
most cases. I mean, a lot of places in the US have actually really not been gardened before. So there's
Mm-hmm.
not, the soil, they may have been clear cut
Yeah.
and that was it, and
Yeah.
so the soil structure is not there. There's just a lot of that needs to be built up over time. And
Yeah.
I do talk about the slow process being best, actually. And
Yeah.
yeah, but so giving them, the residential gardeners, the skills that they need so they can
Mm-hmm.
make and maintain
Yeah.
these things. And then just the fact that, the skills that we have, if you think about it, I mean, I have a fruit tunnel, I have an entry garden. If I hadn't known how to make a fruit tunnel in a cost-effective way, because I couldn't afford a big metal structure. I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't pay for someone to solder that at that time. I used bamboo
Mm-hmm.
canes and ties of all sorts, and I used rope actually to bend it over, at the top. The way you are doing it, the skills of the gardener create the
Mm-hmm.
garden. So
Yeah.
you're never going to make a garden that you don't know how to do. So
Yeah. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it's just that idea of like, what support does each client need? And actually, so the very first part of my process is to have them first fill out a survey, because I do get people very often who say, oh, I'd love a garden design, and I always say, great, here's my survey, fill it
Yeah.
out. It's like an intake
Yeah.
survey. Here's my survey, fill it out. And when you've done that, then you'll be on the wait list, because a lot of people, they'll say, and I've had people so many times be like, oh, I'll send that, I will do that today.
Yeah.
I've never heard from them again. And it's not that they're bad people. It's not that they're lost and that they won't ever get there. I certainly understand. I have 3 children and a rabbit. Life happens. And so, that is life sometimes. And yet, as a 1-person office, I'm the only person. I'm
Yeah.
trying to see, like, okay, who's willing to put in the time and
Mm.
fill this out, and then we'll work at getting a spot on the schedule. So it's all about buy-in for me. It's about
Yeah.
client buy-in from the beginning. Like,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
love to help you.
Yeah.
Can you spend the time? And so right when they start filling that out, I start asking questions like, what's your favorite season? Of course,
Mm-hmm.
what are your favorite colors? What styles do you like, and all that. But
Mm-hmm.
it's trying to bring them along on
Mm-hmm.
the journey, not just give them a solution. And so before our first meeting, I asked them to send me photos of their garden,
Mm-hmm.
the spot that they want to work on,
Yeah.
so that they're clear, what they take the time to think about what they want. And because my goal for the first meeting is to learn about them and to walk away with a list of their current concerns.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And getting to the bottom, like getting to that list, actually, I find can be difficult because what you want, a lot of us aren't trained to
Yeah.
think about what we want.
Oh,
Um,
right.
and
Yeah.
so when you say to someone, well, what do you want here? And of course, they may not know all the options. So
Exactly.
there's
Yeah.
that too. As a
Yeah.
designer, I'm saying, well, did you know you could grow a rambler on your house?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Options of what you can do is part of my job. But I think the deeper part for me that I think I've never heard another designer talk about this, And I kind of think this is my magic sauce, so to speak, is
Yeah.
that is that I really try to value the emotions that
Hmm.
the client walks into the process with,
Hmm. Hmm.
because there's often a lot more there than appears on the surface. Um,
Right.
they might be really sad because they just lost some trees or plants they loved. They might have just lost the physical ability to care for their garden the
Yeah.
way it was,
Yeah.
and now they can't. They might be nervous because they don't understand the design process, and
Mm.
they're unsure about where you're going with things, and they might be uncomfortable because by definition, when they bring their garden to you, they're showing you the problems, and
Yeah. Yeah.
that can feel like walking into the confessional.
Yes.
This
Yes.
is
Yeah.
my personal weaknesses here, and so I hear a lot of people apologize, oh my goodness, yeah,
Yeah.
I was supposed to take care of that years ago, but it's still sitting there,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so you're kind of walking in a tender place
Yeah, yeah.
with people.
I think that is one thing about gardens and plants is that people do immediately blame themselves for any losses or problems, or oh, it's my fault because those seeds didn't germinate, and it was my fault. Well, perhaps it was a duff bag of seeds. I mean, it's sort of, I think people are very quick to just say, because often I think people think that gardening often is like a dark, mysterious art. And actually, as you know, it's common sense a lot of the time, but people often are quite intimidated by it, aren't they? Thinking that it's beyond me, this thing.
Yeah.
um
Or
do you find that people generally are happy to go with what I'm calling the kind of slow gardening method that you're talking about, developing a garden? Do you ever get people saying, look, I just want it and I want it by next Monday? People are quite happy to enter into that nice slow process with you of developing. That's really interesting that
yeah,
they don't.
I
Yeah.
would say those aren't the kind of clients who are probably attracted to
Well,
me.
that's
uh,
great. That's great that you're not, you don't get people that say, I just want an instant garden. I don't really want to know much about it. Just do it.
and that's where I would say in our meeting, I would say that, a
Yeah,
garden
yeah.
can't be bought.
We're
It's
not for each other. Yeah.
not a well, the garden can't be bought. It's not a product. It
Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
it is the product of a process of
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that is something I will just talk about that.
And
And so a
And
lot of
I'm intrigued by your clients. So are you generally working with a single person, or one person in the family, or a couple, or is there a sort of usual kind of model to this, or does it just vary from family to family and house to house?
It does vary, but
Yeah.
one of the things that I had marked down to mention is that, when I have a couple in particular,
Yeah.
they almost always differ in
Yes.
their feelings of the process.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you usually have one partner who is looking kind of stony faced,
Yeah.
and all they can think about is the maintenance and the cost.
Yeah.
And then you have the other partner who's what got you to this point,
Yes.
because they're excited
This
and
is
they
all
want.
sounding very familiar, Julie.
Yeah, and so I actually think of I joke about it, but I actually call myself in those instances a garden therapist,
Yeah. Yeah.
because oftentimes I'm kind of going back and forth
Mhm.
between the couple, and I'm kind of saying, well, I validate that point. Like, I can see, there are concerning things about maintenance and cost, and we
Yeah.
should consider those.
Yeah.
But I think we can do that. I think we can have the vision,
Yeah. Yeah.
and find a practical way, because if you do not find a practical way, then it
Yeah.
will never last.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
has to be practical. It has to be both. So yeah, I feel like a marriage counselor a little bit, where,
Yes.
I'm trying to, and actually, I think it's good to have them both there. What's more difficult is when you talk to one and then they go back,
Yeah.
and you never kind of get to address the other
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
members' feelings, and so yeah, so that goes back to the buy-in. I just want to make sure that the clients feel listened to, that I really have not rushed through that process, that I have
Yeah.
listened, that I have answered their questions, that I have, shown them, try to brighten the horizon, to show a bit more.
Yeah.
But I've also validated their concerns, because there are real concerns, it's, especially financial concerns.
Mm.
You know, I like that this process makes gardening more accessible to
Mm-hmm.
people. And so you asked who I work with. I mean, very often I do work with families of children, and sometimes they're single income homes. And so,
Mm-hmm.
the finances aren't there all the time. And
Yeah.
yet, I mean, that's actually, by and large, what we've been, as I've been
Yeah.
help teaching my own children, and in this process of, self-employed, and, going back and forth. So and to me, but again, to me, it's really valuable for those families to make a place where they can have the memories together, where
Mm-hmm.
the children are growing up around plants, and where they can create this whole little world. And you can,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
can do it. It can be hard work, but it's usually, I always say, the implementation is the hard work.
Yeah.
Oftentimes maintaining it is not what you think it is. It's not as
Yeah.
hard as you think
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
might be.
And what happens when, I mean, you can't keep accruing more and more and more clients. So at a certain point, do people say, Julie, we're kind of, we can run with it now. We've arrived, and we might check in with you every few months. But so do you have to sort of, you know, cast them off and say you're on your own now? So how does that work?
Mhm. So we go through the process, like I said, the intake, the meeting,
Hmm.
we, get it. And I often put that ball back in their court again. So
Hmm.
I'm saying, I send one, I think an important part of the process is that I send a meeting follow up, and I
Yeah.
usually just sit right there, and I don't use AI. I
Yeah.
use my own brain, and I write down everything we talk, everything I
Yeah.
can remember. And oftentimes, of course, I'm not remembering exactly, but I'm remembering something else, and I'm adding it in. And so it's a bit of a teaching email,
Yeah.
that I'm sending follow up. And at that point, I always put the ball in their court and say, wonderful meeting you. We can do this, or this moving forward. You
Hmm.
just let me know. And I
Yeah.
like to step back,
Yeah.
and let them think about that.
Yeah.
And because when they come back, um, those are the most committed people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes at that point, then we decide, am I doing a small plant list? I mean, I almost always do actually use I for 20 years almost, I've been using Pinterest as a
Oh yeah. Yeah.
mood
Yeah.
board. So
Yeah.
it's just an online collection, and I
Yeah.
haven't, it's gotten muddy and all that with the extra advertisements and stuff in recent years, but it still works as a mood board of
Yeah.
sorts. Where
Yeah.
it's they can click on their link, they can see all the plants we were talking about. They
Yeah.
can click on those, because I try to use reliable
Yeah.
picture,
Yeah.
reliable links. They can I would say, read more about the plant, think about
Oh, great.
if
Yeah.
this is something for you. And so they have a direct kind of catalog of links of, it may be also gardening skills. Here's how to edge your garden. Here's how to prune your lavender.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Here's how to do. And so it's kind of a
Yeah.
category,
So
a
that's a really good
catalog.
idea. Yeah. And it's all there and available. Yes. That's
It's all
great.
there. Yeah, they just
Yeah.
click on the link, and I've been doing that. So you can look at my Pinterest board and see all of the projects I've
Yeah.
helped with over 20 years time. And it's interesting to go back and see, which plants was I suggesting
Yeah.
back when, and what do we
Yeah.
suggest now. And
Yeah.
but yeah, and I try to educate them. But at that point, like I said, it's their choice. And but then if I'm doing a plan for them, I do it, and then they get a brief with a maintenance plan and installation notes. And so I, send them that document. And then again, I say, I try to set the expectation at that
Yeah.
point. And I will,
Yeah.
if it's I mean, my gardens are more complicated than anything I've ever drawn for anyone else. But because I live here, this is
Yeah, yeah,
my home and what I'm doing, and this has been a hands-on process. But for other people, I'm telling them, this is your 20-year plan. In
yeah,
other
yeah,
words, you're not going to purchase everything on here. You're not
yeah,
going to build everything on here in the next
yeah,
year. You need to
yeah,
realize that to do this yourself from scratch
yeah,
may take that long. And of course, not everyone's doing. Some people are just tell
yeah,
me 3 bushes to put in front of my house, and so
yeah,
that's what we do. We do what
yeah,
they need, but just that kind of setting that expectation for an intensive succession planting,
yeah, yeah.
so they know that's normal.
Yeah, yeah. No,
That's
that's good.
what
And
it takes.
you obviously, you're based in Pennsylvania, and even my knowledge of geography in the States is not too bad, but Nashville's not on the doorstep. So how does a musician in Nashville find you in Pennsylvania?
I found them
Oh, right.
originally. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So and was speaking to them, and he had a great love for the UK and for everything,
yeah,
uh, everything Anglophile. So
yeah,
he, and I said, do you know I do this?
yeah.
And so we had met them through friends. And
Great, great.
then yeah, and he said, yeah, and actually it's a great example because I didn't know in that situation the deeper emotional process that was going on
Yeah.
underneath that. And he was having some work transitions, and I had no idea. But it was a couple years later when I came back and was doing a garden visit, and his wife looked at me and he said, "You know, this garden saved him.
Oh,
It just
wow.
meant so much at that
Yeah,
moment." And
wow.
um, and and to me, I that's how I feel
Yeah,
about
yeah,
gardening. For me, I feel like, I it gives me um that breath of fresh air when I'll go out and have a hard day, but then go out and just take a lap around the garden
yeah,
and take a look. And to me, that is how I live my life. And so I've heard from people, it's interesting because I've heard from people that, it becomes, oh, our family is we're all going to the nursery this weekend. We're all looking at trees, it becomes this obsession that I am
yeah,
passing on this holistic experience, and how they're living. It's not just, and of course that's not true for everyone. Some people
yeah, yeah,
just need to get some shrubs in so they can sell that house.
yeah, yeah,
And that makes total sense. But even there, it's the seed that's planted, and
yeah, yeah,
Eagle says it waters and you water that
yeah.
seed and it grows. So
I mean,
um,
I'm going to state the obvious now, because obviously America is a huge country, and so gardening in Pennsylvania, gardening in Nashville, gardening on the West Coast. I mean, I know from teaching at Chanticleer, when people come with completely different zones and different conditions, and I don't pretend to know the answers, and that's where all the guys at Chanticleer sort of gather around and go, yeah, no, this would work, this would work, that would work. It's from so how do you find gardening and helping people in a zone, in a climate that's completely different to you? I mean, have you kind of learned on the hoof, as it were, yourself, or how do you do that? How do you research, how to create a garden in somewhere like the South, when you're not in the South?
yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah.
So with fear and trembling, right?
Yeah,
So it does. It comes
yeah,
back to being humble enough to say, I don't know that,
yeah,
but I am going to find out for you
yeah,
that
yeah,
much.
yeah,
Let's investigate. And I think actually the beauty of the internet is really my answer,
yeah,
because when I started gardening personally, almost 25 years ago, I I also began garden blogging
yeah,
back in the day, blogging. Now
yeah,
we call
yeah,
it a newsletter. It's
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
the same thing. Um, So I started reading widely all over the country, and that was the thing when I first, like I said, I started locally, but then I
Hmm.
kind of had this explosion. And what I realized was the people who came to me and what the questions they asked, I could answer those because I had been reading personal accounts of other gardeners all over the country
Right, that's interesting. Yeah,
for several years at that
yeah,
point.
yeah, yeah,
And I also had, of course, friends then all over the country that I could
yeah,
say, hey, does this
yeah,
plant work for you?
yeah,
Is
yeah,
that something you do?
yeah,
And so that I it was kind of this thing. I didn't know that I was creating this data bank for
yeah,
myself.
yeah,
I
yeah,
was reading other people's basic garden journals, but I was.
yeah,
And and I would say that while it's true, there are things that are different, but at the level, when you're starting out um, with a new garden, there's a lot that just, you can speak to across the board.
yeah, yeah.
That
A lot of the principles are the same, aren't they?
Yeah, of
Obviously,
course,
yeah, yeah,
which is why, I live in Western Pennsylvania, but I got a certificate in horticulture from the UK, and that's another thing is I'm used to transposing.
right, right,
I'm used to thinking, okay, they're saying this, but I
yeah,
know this means this for me. And
yeah,
so
yeah,
that's another thing is that, for 20 years I've been transposing, um, trying to make something that actually, would not complete, this can't be Dixter in so many ways.
yeah, yeah,
And yet
yeah,
it has a similar feel, to
yeah,
what, just the intensity of the planting and the structure and all that. So I have a harder time with the tropicals and the zone
yes, yeah, yeah.
pushing and all that stuff. That's a lot harder to do here. But so I think that yeah, I've been practicing that for
Yeah.
so long.
That's good. Oh, we've got a question actually from Jenny Price Nelson, who said, one of my challenges is helping clients be confident in editing and cutbacks after we've taken off the training wheels. I love that, taking off the training wheels. Any tips on helping clients be more ruthless so the design holds together?
Mm,
So, yeah.
great question.
Mm.
So, so I have someone who I've worked with, and actually it's the musician there that I mentioned.
Yeah.
And I went down and did some hands-on gardening with him, and he bought catmint. And I
Mhm.
said, okay, here's how it goes. You cut them, you rip them
Mhm.
apart, and he called me the plant brutalizer. And so there's this idea of, I think that comes back to nursery work, right?
Yeah.
You just
Yeah.
know, if you've worked with plants, you know what they can take, you know what is helpful and what is not helpful.
Yeah.
And um, so it's always been easier for me to demonstrate that hands-on.
Right.
You
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
actually I mean, I just pruned someone's plum tree. She planted it. It was not fruiting and not, and I was like, I think we really need to go after it, and
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
really went after it to try to get some spurs going for
Yeah.
next year. And it was me on a ladder, you know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so that, I mean,
So by showing them, I suppose, by
yeah,
physically showing them, yeah, yeah,
yeah, I really haven't got around that anyway, besides either sending them a YouTube video of someone else doing it,
yeah, yeah,
or being there and doing it myself and saying, give me those shears, here we go,
yeah, yeah. So what would you say is the most sort of challenging aspect of the way you work?
Hmm, good question. Um, hmm. I mean, I want people to feel empowered, but it is sometimes people aren't quite ready
Hmm.
for it, and so and so there are times when I have to backspin a little bit and say, okay, let's back up. I lost you
Mhm,
somewhere along, and that's not necessarily their fault. It
mhm.
may be I was, having a long day and I wasn't catching all those emotional cues if we weren't. Um, um, so that's difficult. And if we're not hitting, sometimes you try as a designer and as a human
Mhm,
to meet up eye to eye with someone, and sometimes it just doesn't work, and
mhm,
so you
mhm.
can't always meet all those needs.
Mm,
So
mm.
for me, I think that's very difficult because I want to I'm this helper, I want to help people.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that is difficult. And then, I mean, sure, if you're handing over your baby a little bit, your
Mm,
plan, your design, and sometimes people will take it this way or this way, and you think, oh, you just missed why I did it that way. And so, I do a lot, especially when I give a plan. I will say, here's why I chose to do this. Here's why I chose these plans.
right.
Here's
Yeah,
how to do it.
yeah, yeah,
But still, life changes, things come up, and so and there may be things that you cannot communicate that you think you have,
yeah,
but
yeah.
you really haven't
Yes,
communicated.
yeah.
And so they go a direction, and then you feel, at those moments, I tell myself, this is their garden. So
Yes, yeah, yeah,
this is,
absolutely. Yeah,
and it's not even that it's wrong, it's just that I wouldn't have done it like that, or I
yeah,
wouldn't
yeah.
have said
No,
it, but
yeah,
and that comes back to humility. So I think
mm,
in all these cases, it's, as a helper, you're tempted to think, I can help them best this way.
yeah,
And of course, that's not always how human relationships work. Sometimes it doesn't work. So you have to take
yeah,
yourself down a level and be like, okay, what they
yeah,
actually needed to hear from me was
yeah,
this. And that's okay. That doesn't
yeah,
hurt my feelings. It doesn't ruin our work together. It's still, I still help them. They still have a garden, and they didn't
yeah,
before.
yeah.
So,
And then on the converse side of that, what is the best thing about what you do? What is it that really, makes you skip up the drive when you come home? I mean, what is it that fills you with joy?
yeah, I love seeing people come into gardening
Mhm.
who had been afraid. Sometimes when you begin, they're afraid of your judgment. They're
Yeah,
afraid that you're coming in as a designer and you're going to say, I see you did all these things wrong,
yeah,
and when they can relax into that, and they can start the process, and then, all of a sudden they're implementing the plan, and they're empowered to do it, and then they come back, and
mm,
they're a gardener, you
yeah,
know
yeah,
they're it's not an overnight thing,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah,
it is. I've had it happen several times where someone, will come back and say, I had no idea that this was going to be such a meaningful part of my life.
yeah, yeah,
And in fact, to say, someone say, if I should pass away, they told their wife, make sure this garden is built, make sure and so, wow,
oh,
like that's meaningful.
yeah,
They
absolutely. Yeah, it really is.
feel, yeah, like that the process of gardening means so much to them.
Yeah. And I'm intrigued. So if you're at a party and you're introduced to somebody and they say, "So Julie, what do you do? How do you describe yourself in a sort of succinct way? What, do you, how do you describe your work?"
I've started saying horticulturalist and garden designer,
Right,
because
right.
I'm working with plants,
Yeah,
and I'm designing residential gardens. So
yeah.
and I don't tell them, well, I will be your therapist when you fill this out. I don't really talk about that, which is what
Yeah,
it was kind of funny when Noel brought up me talking about this. I had to really think about it
yeah,
because I don't sell packages for
yeah,
garden coaching. It's really a part of my
Yeah,
process the whole
it's
way
your, yeah,
through.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, if anybody else listening has any questions, please do pop them in the chat box while we're sort of finishing up. But I mean, it's such a relevant thing. I mean, the conversation we're having is so relevant. We've just had the conference over in Bergamo where we had one day was actually dedicated to the relationship between the designer and the gardener. And we had Tom Stewart Smith and Katie Merrington and Fernando Martos from Spain and his wonderful gardener Carlos, or gardener that works with him, and it's very interesting that the sort of symbiotic relationship, but also, you know, that there is this tension over here, and I don't know if it happens in the States, with gardeners feeling that designers get the money, get the limelight, get the accolades, and the gardeners don't. And it is true to a certain extent, and gardeners are notoriously badly paid universally, I know that. um but you know, it's sort of interesting, the model that you've chosen, because it sort of bridges that gap, really. It's sort of, you know, you're doing both, and you're I love the way that you're not in a hurry, and you're holding people's hands, and you're developing this garden with them. And I bet that your clients' gardens mean so much more to them because they are very involved with it, you know, with you and the process. It's not just sign the check, here's the garden, oh yeah, very nice, thank you, bye Julie. You know, it's this, it's much deeper than that. And I think, yeah, it would be wonderful if there were more people doing what you do, you know. I think it would be, yeah, it's a great way. And it also, I think it's wonderful that people have the patience and the time to say, okay, we're going to enter into this journey with you, and it's going to be something that will happen over weeks, months, years, not necessarily, you know, a few days, a few weeks, you know. So it's fascinating. And you know, congratulations for making, you know, for carving this out. I think it's fantastic, and I'm sure there are other people who work in a similar way, but it's just so lovely to hear the story and how particular you are. And yeah, you know, I just think I just imagine that your clients, I'm sure you must get work through your clients. They must say, oh, you've got to meet Julie, you know, she's transformed me and my garden. You know? You must get that happening all the time.
They're very kind. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
A
um
lot of wonderful people. And necessity is the mother of invention. I mean,
yeah,
that's, you know,
absolutely.
I think the thing that holds it together for me really is that I'm a teacher. So I think it came naturally for me from the get-go to
Yeah,
think, how can I teach about this,
yes,
not just hand it off. And there are, I definitely meet with people who, you know, I walk up and they, like I said, need two things. I give them a list, I draw a little sketch, and that's it, I'm gone.
yeah, yeah,
But still, you know, sometimes years later they'll buy another house and they'll call me back and say, I need help
yeah.
with this now, you know.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. Have you ever had the situation where you're designing the garden for their children? Because I mean, I've got to that age now where I'm sort of, you know, you've done, the parents are saying the kids have just bought a house. Can you do the garden?
uh,
Yeah.
not yet, but
It'll come. It'll come.
I did have some college age. So, you know, a family I helped and their son got into college age, and he pulled me aside. And actually, it's a good reminder. It was one of the most precious comments. He pulled me aside and said, I don't have a house yet. I mean, he wasn't graduated from college. He didn't, you know,
Yeah.
all yet, but he said, I want you to do the plan someday.
Oh,
And
that's
that
wonderful.
that was so sweet because he had been one of the children who had been digging the paths and moving
Oh,
rocks, and
oh
like he did
wow.
the work.
Yeah, yeah,
um, and it wasn't odious for him. He
yeah,
caught it too, you know. And
yeah,
so that, that's probably is actually the best comment I've ever had.
Absolutely. Oh, the next generation. So before we finish up, I'll read some of the comments. So Jenny's come back and said, I like hearing that you have just a few clients rolling at a time. To give new gardeners the time and the attention they need can be very draining. I can't imagine doing it any other way. And Margot Martin says, as a garden designer myself, this is a conversation that resonates, interesting, informative. I don't want this conversation to end. Thank you. Well, thank you, Margot. And Jenny saying again, absolutely on target from my experience as well. Wish we were close enough to have cocktails. um, and Margot's come back again and said, one key takeaway we share, empower your clients, which I think is so true, isn't it? Empower your clients. And something that you said that I often say when I'm teaching as well, it's their garden, not to impose you on their garden. And sometimes that's hard. The kind of control freak goes, oh no, you can't, oh no, but I have to think, no, it's their garden, it's not my garden, it's their garden. That's a really important distinction, I think.
Right. Which we learn from plants as well, right? Because we get this idea of, I'm going to plant you here. Well, they don't care.
Exactly. And
they don't care who you are, what your credentials are. And I think I was thinking it's a similar humility to, gardeners. We learn this because we're doing our own gardening, and we know, that plants will not always do what we want. And it's the same with people. We have to consider, and of course,
absolutely.
Every place is different. So
absolutely. Right person, right place, I suppose. Right plant, right place. Well, Julie, it's been so lovely chatting to you, because it was just that moment. It's like the sliding doors moment, isn't it? Arrive at Dixter, open the door, and I hear your voice, and I hear Pennsylvania. Oh, right, okay, who's this then? And then we get to meet and talk, which was so nice. And so it's been really lovely to hear your process. And I hope more people will. I hope people will listen to this, but I hope people will consider this as a process, because I think it's such a wonderful. Obviously you really enjoy it, but God, I can imagine we should have had one of your clients on as well. Maybe next time, because it must be so wonderful for them to know that they're in your safe hands. So thank you very much. One day I will make it to Western Pennsylvania. I've always wanted to go and see falling water, so it's on my hit list.
Yes. So we're only about 150 miles from there.
So. Only another 150 miles. Okay.
come in Trillium time, and I'll show you my river of Trillium here.
Oh, how wonderful. It sounds delicious. Okay, well, thank you very, very much. It's been lovely spending a few moments in Pennsylvania. It's very clever. Some people are sending hearts up the screen. That was Adam, and Jenny did it before. I don't know how they're doing it, but this is a new thing on me. But are you seeing those hearts floating up the screen? Very good. Oh my goodness, hearts bursting. We've never had this before. This is fantastic. So thank you, and thank you everyone for tuning in and finding us, and do remember that if you want to sort of give us any pointers on the website, please do. Oh, another heart coming up. Cynthia's found the heart button. It's great. So Julie, thank you so much, and happy gardening. That's all I can say, really.
Thank you, Annie. Thanks for having me.
Okay, see you at the next Dixter Plant Fair then.
Okay, sounds good.
It's a deal. Take care. All right, bye-bye everyone. Bye-bye.